What's up YouTube, your old school expert, and today I've got another old school deck profile. This one is from 2003 and it is a Fire Princess burn deck from the release of Labyrinth of Nightmare back in 2003. So it uses that ban list format, and this deck was really good back then. It was pretty much meta. Meta back then was essentially beat down and burn decks, and with a lot of different variations, but this variant of burn is Fire Princess burn. So we're gonna get right into it, and the first cards obviously are 3 Fire Princess. If you don't know what this does, as long as it's face up on the field, every time you gain life points, your opponent loses 500 life points. Now the cool thing about this effect is that it stacks. So essentially, if you've got 2 cards that simultaneously activate, after each one resolves, your opponent loses 500 life points for each one that resolves. So that's very useful, and it made this deck pretty good back then when decks were a lot slower, and this could just stall out and beat you with Fire Princess. So 3 of these girls, and of course, to bring them out, we had 2 UFO turtles. This was pretty useful, almost essential in this deck, because she's not super easy to just get out with no good searching stuff. So definitely UFO turtle. Back then, that was kind of the way you search for stuff, and you didn't add it to your hand, you just summoned it to the field. So 2 UFO turtles. Then the life gaining stuff. So 3 Nimble Momongas. This was pretty critical in this deck because it not only you gain 1,000 life points when your opponent attacks one of these and sends it to the graveyard, but what was really nice about this is that you can special summon 2 more and put them in face down defense positions. So it kind of guards your life points while at the same time giving you life points and helping out your Fire Princess if you've got one on the field. So definitely 3 of those. And then of course 3 Marie the Fallen ones. So this card's effect is, as long as this card is in your graveyard, increase your life points by 200 points during each of your standby phases. So if you got all 3 of these girls in the graveyard and you have a Fire Princess on the field, your opponent loses 1,500 attack points, or sorry, 1,500 life points, way more important, per standby phase. That's pretty critical, and that's a lot of life points. After just a few turns, having 3 of these in the graveyard really makes a big difference. Plus, you're gaining while your opponent's losing, so it was a really nice strategy. Next, we have just 1 Cure Mermaid. I guess I could put another one in, but I don't think, because this card is so effective in this format, you don't need all that much life-gaining stuff. You just need a few things, and you really depend on, these are pretty critical in this deck. You really depend on Marie the Fallen one more than anything else. So Cure Mermaid is useful, but she gets destroyed sometimes, and that's why I just run 1. And then 1 Morphing Jar, because you really want to get these Maries to the graveyard. So this actually really helps. Obviously, not a lot of people had this back then, but it was limited to 1. You could use it. So it's in there just for fun. A Cyber Jar that kind of helps you move along, get cards out of your deck and start setting up your stall stuff. So it also brings out Fire Princess, allowing you to special summon them to the field. So that's useful. And it gets rid of big monsters too. So definitely 1 Cyber Jar. And then 1 Witch and 1 Sangan. These are extremely good. They were restricted to 1, so you could just run 1 of each. But Witch searches for pretty much anything in this deck, and then Sangan searches for anything besides Marie the Fallen ones. So pretty good cards there and very useful in the deck. They're pretty much splashable staples that went in any deck of this format. So that's the monsters. We're going to move on to the magic cards. So 2 Messenger of Peace. This was just a critical stall, and it stopped Jinzo, which was the biggest thing. Jinzo was huge back then. It was just really difficult. If you were running burn deck, Jinzo just kind of stopped you dead in your tracks. So Messenger of Peace stops Jinzo. You got 1 Swords of Revealing Light. I would run 2, but you could only run 1 in this format. So that's very standard for the format, and especially for this deck because you need to stall. 1 Card Destruction. This wasn't used very much back then, but Card Destruction is good in this deck because if you've got a hand that you just can't use or whatever, and you really need some Fire Princesses to come out, or whatever the case is, or you've got some Marie the Fallen ones in your hand, you want to get them to the graveyard, Card Destruction is excellent. So definitely 1 Card Destruction. And along those lines, 1 Painful Choice, because same thing, you want to get those Marie the Fallen ones to the graveyard as quickly as you can. Plus, it adds something to your hand. They're probably always going to pick Marie the Fallen one of the 5 cards that you choose to put in your hand, but whatever. This is really useful. And then monster destruction, so one Raigeki, just again for those like Jinzos and just pesky monsters, Dark Hole. And then one tribute to the Doomed, because it was really, after Dark Hole and Raigeki, there wasn't too much good monster destruction, especially stuff that lets you target a monster. This lets you target. You do have to discard a card, but again, you got 3 Marie the Fallen ones, plus other stuff that's usable that you could discard, or just stuff that you may not need. So this card was a really nice insurance policy back then. Especially for a deck like this, where it has a couple of weaknesses where you really need to get rid of stuff like Jinzo. So 1 Pot of Greed, of course, 2 Graceful Charities, that was at 2 back then. 1 Monster Reborn to get your Fire Princesses back, because they inevitably are going to be destroyed by different magic and trap cards, along with monsters if you can't protect her. And then 1 Premature Burial, same thing. So that is the magic cards. I would usually side 1 more Messenger of Peace, just in case you're playing like a really aggro beatdown. And then, especially one that runs, like, I think you could have 2 Heavy Storms back then. This deck doesn't run that at all. So then we got 2 Solemn Wishes, a trap card. It's a continuous trap, and for each, I think it's, you gain 500 life points each time you draw a card or cards. So not per card, but anytime you draw, you gain 500 life points. It's excellent with Fire Princess. So if you've got one of these on the field, you've got your Fire Princess, and then you've got Marie the Fallen one, say you've got 2 of her in the graveyard, that's, that's 1,000 for the 2 Marie the Fallen ones, and then 500 for this, just during your draw phase. So really useful card, and it was a real pain in the ass to deal with back then. I played a lot of Fire Princess decks, and I used a couple too. So next we got Gravity Bind. This is obvious. This is the best way to stall in this format. If Jinzo's not on the field, they're going to have to do something Mystical Space Typhoon, Heavy Storm, or Harpy's Feather Duster, because Gravity Bind just sits there and stalls. And against this deck, the last thing, when you're playing against this deck, the last thing you want is to just sit there and stall, because you're just getting burned by Fire Princess every turn. Next we got a Mirror Force, both to protect Fire Princess and also to just get rid of big monsters. Call the Haunted, of course, like Monster Reborn and Premature Burial, brings back Fire Princess, or really anything in this deck that you want back from the graveyard. Pretty much anything's useful except Marie the Fallen one. Magic Cylinder, it's just a great burn card, and can really just kind of finish off the game, and it negates the attack as well, so very useful in that format. Ceasefire, that's another just great burn deck, burn card for this burn deck. Everything in this deck is an effect monster, so you're gonna do some pretty decent damage with Ceasefire. Magic Jammer. Now this is, again, it's one of those cards that, like, you don't have to use it, but I really like the insurance that it provides, because there is Heavy Storm, there is Harpy's Feather Duster, and there is Mystical Space Typhoon, and they're always going to be hitting these Gravity Binds and then the Solemn Wishes, or Swords of Revealing Light, or whatever you need to stall, burn, whatever. So this card was really useful. You almost always had like a Marie the Fallen one or something in your hand you didn't really necessarily need with this deck. So this is a very useful card. And then finally, Imperial Order. That's pretty standard, pretty obvious. It's mostly used just for like 1 turn, because usually you've got a Messenger of Peace out on the field and you don't want to negate it. But if your opponent uses like Pot of Greed or Heavy Storm or Raigeki or something, you're gonna sacrifice 1 turn without your Messenger of Peace for for Imperial Order to negate whatever they activated. So that's it, guys. It's 40 cards, and it's a lot of fun. It doesn't always work. Sometimes you just can't get your Fire Princess out there long enough and keep it out there long enough. But what's really nice about this deck is you're gaining life points while your opponent is losing them. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in that regard. And you'll soon realize you'll end up with like 11 or 12,000 life points while your opponent's down to like 2,000 or 3,000. And from then, it's just really easy to burn them out. So thanks for watching, guys. Tell me what you think. Tell me if you would make any adjustments, improvements, or if you ran a deck similar to this in the comments. Thanks for watching, and make sure you subscribe for more awesome Yu-Gi-Oh videos.